Welcome to the Rematch. Today, my guests are two men who I have a great deal of respect for. First, the OG, David Aldridge. He's been in the media game for decades, sports journalist and sideline reporter, currently senior writer for The Athletic. And I can read off all your accolades and awards, but we would be here all day. But Mr. David Aldridge, how you doing, sir?
Etan, always a pleasure to talk to you, man. I'm doing fine.
Definitely. And next, we have senior NBA writer for ESPN and Andscape, which is the revamped version of The Undefeated, a co-author of the Spencer Haywood Rule and host of Beyond 28 podcast, Mr. Marc Spears. How are you doing, sir?
Man, good morning. I love you. You got me up in the morning. I said, I'll get up for him.
Hey, listen, I definitely appreciate y'all taking the time out and coming on the Rematch today, basketballnews.com and Fly TV. And we're going to discuss the relationship or the tension between the media and players, which has been in existence for quite some time. But with more players now going into the media, that tension has been vocalized more and more. And David, I'll start with you. What is your take on this current rift, if you will, with the new media and old media? What is your overall take on it as a whole?
Well, I think you have to start each time with kind of definitions, right? You have to start. Words are important. Words matter to me. I've made my living with them, and so you have to kind of. We can't start a discussion on this until we all agree what we're talking about. When we talk about old media versus new media, that's a very kind of broad scale definition. If you're including an old media kind of traditional print broadcast reporters who cover sports teams and things like that, okay, that's one way you can define old media. But if you're lumping into old media kind of this more recent phenomenon of this talking head stuff that you see on TV, I would push back to say that's not media. That's television. That's a whole different thing.
And that's fair. And I think that
television is based on conflict, whether the conflict is real or not. It does not really matter for television. My journalism professor in college used to always say, we do not write stories about planes that land on time and cars that drive on the right side of the road. Very true. So that kind of, if you're talking about that kind of media, or that kind of whatever you want to call it, that's part of that. That's a worthy discussion. Certainly, players now are controlling their own contributions to media. They're starting their own media companies where they have creative control over the product. They do the interviewing, for lack of for better term, and they control the message. And I think that's great. I think it's great. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with Players Tribune. I have no problem with podcasts where the host is a player. I would just say that also is not what I would consider media, because media is not generally, kind of a one-sided prism. It's a two-sided, ideally it's a multi-sided prism, but it's at least a two-sided prism, conduit of information flow. But that's my opinion, right?
I think that's a good point. And Marc, we've talked about this, and you have an issue as well as far as lumping all of the media into one big bucket. You've expressed that to me. Talk about that a little bit as well.
Well, for years, I always kind of feel when people say the media, like we're this gang, like the Crips or the Bloods or something like that. The media, it just kind of cracks me up. But ESPN always, I tell athletes, I'm like, ESPN stands for Entertainment Sports Network. You got to remember that. Like, so these shows are such to conjure discussion, conjure probably more debate than anything else. So when Draymond says that, I've been wanting to ask him, because I almost feel like a lot of people's definition is different. Like, Draymond, what's your definition? What does that mean when you say that? Because I think it's more of a definition with television, as David mentioned. Players talking about players, media like Stephen A. or the guys on Fox talking about players. But it's interesting. You see a guy like Kendrick Perkins, who was a good NBA player, wasn't a superstar, but he shows you JJ Redick wasn't a superstar. Kenny Smith was a good player, wasn't a superstar. But if you give some strong takes, if you have opinions, if you're entertaining, you may make it on TV more so than a superstar. Patrick Beverly somehow made it on TV and made his presence known. And but I remember, and I told you this, he's on talking to Allen Iverson and asking him, like, why won't you do TV? I think you would be great on one of those shows. He's like, man, I just don't want to talk bad about my brothers. I don't want to talk bad about them. So I think the definition, I'm guessing the definition from which Draymond keeps speaking of, deals with the talking heads in the morning, the shows. Mm-hmm. But most journalists are journalists. They're not trying to entertain and give you their opinion, or are not even allowed to give you their opinion. So that's where I think it's maybe touches a nerve, say with me or David, because I think we're not new media, we're not old media. I think we're just media. Like we're just journalists.
So let me ask you this, and I'll start, Malcolm X said a long time ago that the media is the most powerful entity on earth because they control the minds of the masses. Now, going from that standpoint, whether you're a journalist, whether you're, a talking head, whether you're doing podcasts, you're still controlling the minds of the masses from the standpoint where people are viewing you as the media. Yeah. So when you have different talking heads, kind of pontificating on whatever their points are, they're able to control the narrative, shape the minds of people, and to have certain opinions towards athletes. And I think that's what a lot of athletes are pushing back on, is the level of not just reporting the news or analyzing or being critical of someone's play, but the inflammatory, where it's personal and it's a personal attack on a person in a player in a way that it shapes the minds of the fans of that player. And that's a little bit more of why it's all in the category of the media. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna ask you, Etan, give me your names of the 10 most inflammatory or the 5 most inflammatory people that you're speaking of, in your opinion.
Well, the people that you named. You got, Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless. You have Nick Wright. You have, all the people on the ESPN and the Fox channels, the people who are being played every single morning. Yeah. And their opinion is being taken as if it is media. You know what I mean? As if it is news, as these are facts. And then what happens is that when they repeat, you know how it is, when you repeat something over and over and over again, people start believing it. And then so you repeat that this guy is trash. I wouldn't, trade him for a bag of chips. He's a terrible player. He's this. Those type of descriptions then permeate throughout the entire basketball world or sports world, and they become reality. So it's
I got to jump in on this. This is the same argument I have with CJ McCollum all the time, who's the president of the Players Association. Mm-hmm. And I say this to him all the time. CJ, you play professional basketball for a living. Okay? Like, you're one of 450 people on earth who are in the NBA, which means you know more about what makes a good basketball player than I ever will, than Marc Spears ever will. Why do you give a damn what Stephen A. Smith says about basketball? Why do you care?
Well, I'll tell you why, though. Because when somebody repeats something and it reverberates throughout the entire basketball world, everybody takes it as news. So for instance, people will say, why do you care what Fox News says? We know they're not real news. But if they repeat something over and over again, people start to believe it as news.
The people that believe that, if you want to take that, are people that are going to believe that the election wasn't real. Like, right. So why are you Why are you worried about the opinions of people who don't think Joe Biden's the actual president of the United States, or who think there's a child pornography ring out of Comet Pizza on Connecticut Avenue? I don't know why it's important that everybody the only people that should matter to me are players and general managers and coaches and owners' opinions. If you're telling me owners' opinions are swayed by what's on Fox or what's on ESPN in the morning, then I would say, wow, that's a problem. But I don't think they are, because I think the guys that deserve to get paid still get paid. I think the guys that deserve to be on all NBA teams still make all NBA teams. I think the guys that have the personality to get commercials. I don't see where the deleterious effect on players is, other than on Twitter, which isn't real anyway. You know what I mean? Like, what is Twitter? It's not real. That's not what's that? 95% of people on this planet do not look at Twitter at all, don't know what Twitter is. So why do you care?
But this is the thing, David, though, we're just seeing right now, and I'm, relating it to the Fox News example that you gave, that if, we're seeing with the January 6th commission right now, many people were swayed. Many people were swayed by what they were told. They were told that the election was stolen. And you had all those people organized over that untruth that was permeated on Fox News and repeated over and over again. Now I'm making a correlation to something being repeated over and over again on every single talk show, on ESPN, on Fox Sports, all on the news talk shows, everything being repeated over and over again. People start believing it. So then once they start believing it, you know what I mean? Then it takes its power, whether it's true or not.
What's the power? That's what I keep getting back to. What effect does it have materially on basketball players? Do they get fewer contracts? Do they get worse contracts because of something that's on First Take or on whatever the other shows are called? Do they get less accolades? Do they get fewer all-star appearances or fewer endorsement deals? Nothing happens to them except people yapping. It has no impact on them.
I have to disagree. I have to disagree.
Impact.
But listen, okay, so I'll go back to my Washington Wizards years. Right, my teammate was Kwame Brown. Stephen A. Smith in particular, and a lot of different, commentators that we're talking about on ESPN every single day made it their point to say that everything that happened wrong with the Wizards was Kwame Brown's fault. I was there. I was watching. They created narratives that, he was this bumpkin that didn't know how to order food. And then I'm literally sitting in a restaurant with him reading an article with somebody saying he doesn't know how to order food. This is why high school players shouldn't be in the league. There's agendas attached to the things that are said. The reason why you saw Kwame Brown recently go off on all the media, because he just couldn't take it anymore. 20 years of silence, but he was like, okay, this is the last straw right here. And then he blew up. Did he go overboard? Maybe. But it was for 20 years of it being built up. So when you ask what effect can it have, I've seen it firsthand have the effect.
Okay. I would again, Marc, I want you to jump in here.
I'm enjoying this, y'all.
Again, Etan, you're right. People did say Kwame Brown was a bad first pick. A lot of people said it, wrote it, whatever. Kwame Brown still played 10 years in the NBA. He didn't. It's not like his career ended because he got bad press. He played a long time in the NBA. So again, I differentiate between kind of bar talk, talk in the basement when you with your guys and you watching TNT and Chuck says something. Chuck says Zion Williamson is overweight, and they all laugh. I wouldn't do it that way. You know me. I don't think Spears would do it that way. But Zion Williamson is still going to make a ton of money in this league. He's still a very important part of the Pelicans' future. So what I'm saying is, I don't see where the impact is where people, if you're saying people's feelings get hurt, I agree with you. And that's worth discussing. If you're saying it's wrong to clown Kwame Brown because it's unfair to Kwame and it makes him feel bad, or it hurts his family members, I would say you are exactly right. And that's worth talking about. And that's worth discussing. But in terms of the overall impact that all of this really has on people, on athletes, I mean, I just think there's differentiations, but I've talked long enough. Spears, go ahead and talk. I've talked long enough.
No, I do think that the people that are athletes are probably upset out really account for probably 2% of the whole journalist population. Most journalists probably write by the book, write in a newspaper fashion, just tell the news. It's not a lot of opinion. There are, even in the newspaper world, unfortunately, there's not even a lot of columnists anymore. A lot of these columnists have gone by the wayside. And then also on the internet, I think you have to decipher like who's journalists and who's just throwing stuff together with the blogs. And so the definition of who media is now is quite confusing. But I just I noticed the name Stephen A keeps coming up. Stephen A is an entertainer. That's his job. And but in the same token, I remember when hearing like, and David could back me up on this for years, man, like Russell Westbrook was just a jerk to the print media. Let me be specific to print media. I'm like, I met him early in his career. He seemed cool. Like, what's the issue? What's the problem? Every game, just short, smart ass answers, just didn't want to be there. And for years, I just always wondered, like, what is the issue? And ultimately later, I guess it was his book or something like that, or no, it was a documentary. He said that Jeff Van Gundy and Magic Johnson said something bad about him on TV. So I was like, he's been taking that out on us for 10 years because those two guys on TV said something. And I really think that the access, like if somebody on TV is really bothering a player, they should call them and handle it one-on-one, because the majority of the people that cover that player, and I'm saying about 98% of the people that are covering that player are really just covering that player and don't have the ability to even make an opinion about whether they're overweight or whether they suck or not or anything like that. On ESPN, when they have me on TV, they're just asking me. I play college basketball, but they don't care about my opinion on players. They care about my opinion on performance and what a team needs to do to win, or but not. They don't ask for my personal opinion. And so I think ultimately a lot of these opinions either are coming from somebody like, Stephen A, or that has that kind of power to do that, but mostly it's coming from former players who I think may feel pressure that in order for me to keep this job, I got to be outspoken.
So I think of a few things, and I'll agree with you that the majority of the media, whatever bucket you want to include everyone in, the majority of the media do not conduct themselves like Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless or Nick Wright or those of that ilk. But they are the loudest voices, and those are the voices that you hear every day. And that loud voice drives not only the masses of sports fans, but it also impacts the way that journalists.
But I will preface it. I will stop you real quick to say this is. But this is. You mentioned that other news outlet. They report their misinformation as facts.
Yes.
Where I think Wright and Smith, they're just talking sports and giving their opinion.
But they present them as though they're facts. So, and that's like telling. Honestly, Stephen A. Smith has the same power over the masses that Tucker Carlson has over the right. They'll say all the time, Tucker Carlson's not a real journalist. He's not really a member of the media. He's not that, but he still has the same power.
Stephen A. doesn't conjure racism, though.
What's that?
I said Stephen A. doesn't conjure racism.
I'm not saying. I know. I'm not talking about the topic. I'm talking about the level of influence.
Etan, Alec, for sake of discussion, I will accept your comparison, right? Mm-hmm. If the argument is these people are on TV every day, therefore they have a lot of power, therefore their opinions carry weight.
Yes,
I would come back to again. With who? With who? Do they carry this weight?
With the entire sports world.
Okay, but Etan, I would disagree with you. It's not the entire sports world, because the entire sports world includes team owners, team general managers, head coaches, players. And nobody's gotten more bad criticism of late than Kyrie. Let's use Kyrie as an example.
Okay.
Kyrie just opted in for $37 million. And guess what? When he's a free agent next year, somebody else is going to give him a big contract. Might be Brooklyn, it might not be. But somebody's going to give Kyrie some more paper to play.
But you don't think the narrative that has been repeated by those of Stephen A. Smith and and those of that ilk has hurt the entire image of Kyrie? I mean, going from this past year, we'll take why he was sitting out during the pandemic, and he didn't want to take the vaccine. He was uncomfortable with the vaccine, which a large portion of the country was uncomfortable with it. I had a different conclusion than he had, but I respect his conclusion. Everybody was okay with it until he started missing games. And then I was like, well, wait a minute now. You can't miss. And then you had Stephen A. Smith, he doesn't want to play. He doesn't want. And then that started swaying a narrative where the entire pendulum started to.
Do you believe, Etan, that if I say I agree with you about that was Stephen A.'s opinion or whoever's opinion on Kyrie Irving, mm-hmm. Do you think nobody on the Brooklyn Nets had the same opinion? I mean, come on. Do you think everybody on the Brooklyn Nets was like, hey, I'd love Kyrie to play, but I understand. I respect his wishes to not play.
But nobody was on the Brooklyn Nets was carrying the narrative publicly that he was abandoning his team.
Okay, but
once you have a Stephen A. Smith that says that repeatedly, then you have journalists who start repeating what Stephen A. Smith said in their articles. Okay, then you have a whole narrative that permeates throughout the entire country.
I would humbly submit to you that there were a lot of people within the Brooklyn Nets organization that had the exact same opinion.
Oh, I'm not talking about that.
Was letting them down. That they needed Kyrie to win. They're trying to win championships.
Of course.
Okay, but that's my point. So they didn't want to say it publicly, but that doesn't mean they didn't have the opinion. I mean, the inference is that only journalists, only reporters had this opinion. No, a lot of people had this opinion. No, they said it. That doesn't mean that other people didn't agree with them or didn't have the same opinion.
I think you're discounting
I think Stephen A. was just probably loudest with it.
What's that?
I said a lot of people had the same opinion. I just think Stephen A. was just loudest with his.
Definitely.
Okay, so again, if lots of people had the same opinion,
you're still discounting the power of the pen, the power of whether it's the pen or the microphone that Stephen A. Smith and those have. There is power in it. So when you repeat something over and over again, there is power in it.
There's power in it. I'm saying the impact of the power, I think is far less, especially when you're talking about, and look, we all love sports. We all make our living in sports, okay? All of us love writing, talking, thinking about sports. We're all fans of sports, but it's not the same, I don't believe, as the power of, say, the political media, the power of the political press to kind of shape agendas, where legacy media like the New York Times has an outsized influence on the way the rest of the political press covers things, because people still read the New York Times every day. That's way different than, I would suggest, any talking head on one of the debate shows. Do they have influence? Yes. Do they have some ephemeral type of power and influence over a certain segment of the population? I would agree. I would just again say, what is the impact of that power on a player? I would say the impact is, does it help shape perception of a player? Yes, it does. I would agree with you. It does help shape perception of a player.
And you don't think the perception of a player has any impact on a GM, a president, or a team? That's what you're saying. I
would ask you, if you are talking, who has the worst reputation in pro basketball right now? I mean, I don't have an answer. I'm asking you, who do you think has, based on the media's quote unquote shaping of their perception, who has the worst reputation in the NBA right now? Is it Kyrie, or maybe it's Kyrie? I will, just sake of argument, I'm not saying it is or isn't. Let's just say, sake of argument, Kyrie Irving, because people have been killing him for the vaccine and for a lot of other things, has the worst reputation in the NBA.
Okay.
He's going to be a free agent next year. I defy you to tell me he's not going to get paid next year, regardless of this perception of him out there. If you're telling me Kyrie Irving's going to have to take the minimum next year to play in the NBA, I would say you are incorrect. I'll bet you $100 right now he will not be playing for the minimum next year.
And fair enough, but if you tell me that if he was an unrestricted free agent this year, and the narrative that has been created around him wouldn't have impacted what team signed him for, I would respectfully disagree.
I would disagree. He could play.
Listen. Stephen A. Smith has been saying,
you know this. Talent wins out, man.
Listen, no, he's been drumming. Only sign him for a year. Don't sign him for. So you're gonna tell me that if he was an unrestricted free agent, after hearing that constantly from people like Stephen A. Smith, that teams would not be a little bit more hesitant to sign him for a long-term deal than they would for a year, which Stephen A. Smith has been permeating. That's what you're telling me. It would have no impact.
Okay, at some point, Etan. At some point, the player has to have some responsibility.
I agree. What we're talking about. So what we're talking about with the case of Kyrie is the vaccine, and that's what.
Yeah, I mean, it's the vaccine, but it's also. And look, I'm not questioning his motivation or his reasoning. He took off games the year before. He just took games off. Now maybe he needed to. I'm not saying he was wrong to do it. What I'm saying, he just in the middle of the season said, I need to take a few games off. Okay, that's fine. But there is impact with that, Etan. There's impact when
but you understand the double-edged sword that we're talking about when you have a NBA who is embracing mental health on certain aspects.
I'm not saying he's wrong to do
it. But this what I'm saying. There's a narrative that's created. If the narrative created was that a champion for mental health, and that whole narrative was pushed that way, the entire perception would have been completely different of the games that he took off because he said he needed a break. You understand what I'm saying? The whole thing would have been completely different.
That cuts both ways, though.
He said
when Kyrie said, I don't think we should go to the bubble,
right?
I think a lot of people applauded him for that.
Of course. A lot of people
said, hey, at least this guy's thinking about something other than basketball. I gave him credit for that. And he's saying we should use this platform that we have in the wake of George Floyd. Maybe we should do it for something else besides playing games. Now, I'm not saying everybody agree with that, but a lot of people in the media, as you put it, said, you know what? At least he's thinking about something other than basketball for a second. Good. But
also, a lot of people in the media called him names like dumb. This is the dumbest thing they ever heard. That's the stupidest thing they've ever heard. This is the players' problem with a lot when they say the new media, old media, is the certain language that is used in order to critique someone. So, for example, we can move for Kyrie, but like say for Andrew Wiggins. Mm-hmm. And the level of the language that was used by Nick Wright. He said specifically, like, no, Nick Wright, as far as one person.
Right, but you keep coming back to these same 2 or 3 people.
Well, it's 4 or 5 people, but it's the loudest people that you hear.
Okay, but that doesn't mean, I think.
But wait.
Frustration. This is my frustration.
But if they are the loudest voices.
Okay, but this is the whole point. You decry the loudest voices. And
who decries the loudest voices?
Right. No, what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying.
Okay.
You decry the loudest voices, and decry and then say but in doing so, you're granting them the authority you say you don't want to give them. This is my point. Like, you don't have to give Nick Wright a power. You don't have to say, well, Nick Wright says it, so everybody's saying it. You can just say,
no, it's not. But that's not just whether somebody says it or not. No. But wait, whether somebody says it or not. The entire narrative on Andrew Wiggins for this entire year was that he was what Nick Wright called him, a bad player. That was until if he wouldn't have won, he did well. They made it to the playoffs, then they made it to the finals. Then you saw Nick Wright backing it back. He said, "Okay, I was wrong in what I said."
I just see it as one person.
But wait, 1 second.
I don't.
But wait,
one thing. It as gospel.
One thing though, the only reason why he apologized was because they did well, but he missed the point, was that the issue was in his description of him. He didn't have to prove him wrong for him to still be wrong in how he described him. So the problem is that a lot of players have with the media is the descriptive words they use as far as trash, the terrible player, shouldn't be in the league, wouldn't be that.
I come back to what I said before, Etan. I don't know why you give people who say things like that are obviously inflammatory and designed to create a reaction, why you allow them to give you that reaction. You know what I mean? Like I could choose to watch Tucker Carlson every night and get really angry about the things that he says and the inflammatory language he uses and the obvious talking points and the racism and all that. I could get really upset. I could watch it every night. I could read his tweets and go, God, what a terrible human being. Or I could just say, he's an idiot. Why am I giving him any currency? Why am I listening to him? He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's lying.
And if that's the truth, why would if we both agree on that, if we both agree on that, but you look at the millions of people who listen and hang on his every word, just like they hang on every word of Stephen A. Smith.
Okay, but again, these are people who don't think the election was real. So why do you spend your energy and your time worrying about the opinions of people who are swayed into believing that a dead dictator in South America somehow controlled this last election? They're not worth your time.
And
they're not invincible. They're not swayable. So why are you worrying about them?
If they didn't have the power that they had to shift opinions and shift minds, then I wouldn't worry about them. The only reason why you worry about them is only reason why you worry about Tucker Carlson. Only reason why we're looking at the January 6th commission right now is because of the power that people had to be able to sway people into doing something that they did. That's the reason why you worry about what they say. Yes, we know that Tucker Carlson be lying most of the time. Yes, we know he was a racist. Yes, we know what all the different things. But we saw in real time the power of words, the power of the media, if you want to call Fox News media. So it's in them, and also the danger of the media. So in coming back to the NBA, I do wish that there were more people that had the journalistic integrity of David Aldridge and Marc Spears. I do. And not only just in your writing, but also in your commentary daily on ESPN or Fox News, not yours, but the people who are on there.
Yeah.
So in calling them out, which was what the players, the new media, whatever you want to call them, wants to do, is to be able to say, don't listen to them. Don't listen to what they're telling you.
You know what I would ask them to do? Don't just say who you mad at. Period.
Oh, you're saying not say everybody, just say particular.
No, like I'm telling the athlete, if there is something that bothers you, like Draymond was upset with what Kendrick Perkins said about him, and he made comment directly to Perk.
Okay.
If an athlete, if you got a problem with what Nick Wright say it to Nick Wright. That's not everybody. That's Nick Wright's issue. So my point is that players have the ability to clap back at somebody. Kyrie said something back to what I forgot his
Stephen A. Smith. They was going back and forth.
Well, that too, but the guy from Fox that Steve used to work with, what's his name? I don't watch all them shows like that, but
I got you.
I guess that's what. Yeah, I
mean, my point is, if you got a problem with somebody, these people on these shows, their job is to be entertaining.
Yeah,
and I get it. They say things that certainly will get under players' skin, but if it bothers you that much, if I got a problem with somebody, I'll say it to that person. I'm not going to blame the whole world for the media world for what one person's opinion was.
I think that's a fair point. And I'll also
we're talking about 10 people.
Yeah. Well, I just get frustrated because I've been doing this for a long time. Spears has been doing this for a long time, and there are so many people who care deeply about doing the right thing and doing this job the right way. And it is by far, I mean, it's not even if you said 5% of the people who are in the media, quote unquote, are inflammatory on purpose, right? Are inflammatory to draw attention and to drive traffic and for clicks and things like that. Even if you said it was 5%, I would say I don't think it's 5%. But even if I give you 5%, That means that 95% of the people who are in my line of work and in Spears' line of work try to do the right thing and try to do this job the right way every day, do not call attention to ourselves, don't want to call attention to ourselves. And yet we're lumped in with everybody that has a microphone or that has a pen. And that just is unfair. It's just as unfair as the criticism that you say the players get. Like, why are you lumping people who try to do this the right way, who try to be fair to athletes, who want to be fair to athletes, who want to be fair to everybody, because that's our job, is to try to be fair to everybody. And we just kind of get lumped in, and you're kind of like, well, why does the media do? Well, no, it's not the media. It's a few people in this line of work who do that, and you know who they are. Like, I just don't, I think it, it cuts both ways. If you say people in the media are unfair to athletes and help set the agenda, I would say athletes sometimes are unfair and lump all media together.
I would say that's a fair point. I would say that's a fair point. It's interesting, and I'll make this point and I'll let you go because I know you guys got to leave, and I appreciate you for your time. I just want to say that. But I just wrote a book called Police Brutality and White Supremacy: The Fight for American Traditions. Fight against American traditions. And one of the things that I did was I interviewed a few different police officers in the book. And one of the things that they said was, well, when people talk about police brutality and you see a lot of people get upset on police officers' side, the ones who don't fall into that category shouldn't be getting upset because they're not talking about them. And then so another point that we made was, well, you have the good cops and the bad cops, right? And then it's okay, well, the good cops are the good cops, but do they say anything to hold the bad cops accountable when they are out of line, when they do something that's going to make them look bad, when they're going to do something that's going to create heat on all of them as a whole because of their actions? So now making that correlation to the entire media, we know it's not everybody. You know what I mean? We know when you say the media, we don't. I just told you, David Aldridge, you're in my fatherhood book. You know what I mean? I interviewed you for my father. I've known you for years. No, you do not fall into that category. But I will say that that a lot of times, just like the good cops allow the bad cops to be able to speak for them, a lot of times the media will allow those 10 members or whoever it is to be able to represent all of them.
I would stop you by saying this. One, nobody speaks for me, but if I was a cop and my boss was beating the shit out of black people, I would not be associated with it, and I would definitely have an issue with it, and something's going down.
Yeah,
it's too, politics and sports is too different, and racism are different roads. It's what we do. They used to mess with us when early in my career. David knows this. They called us the toy department. There's a reason why I write in sports. I don't want the stress of writing about real life issues, deaths, politics, wars, rape, abortion. Like, I don't want to write about that, man. I covered sports for a reason, and my respect for the people that do work in those entities and tell those much needed stories is 10 times higher than anybody that writes for sports, because I know the stress they come home to every day. So I don't want to compare my job to what good and bad cops have to deal with every day.
Right.
It's that wouldn't be fair.
I would say this, Etan. I mean, if the inference, if the idea is we should call out bad reporters and we should call out bad, again, it will require me to give them
attention.
Not attention. What's the word I'm looking for? It will require me to give them power.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt had this great saying. She used to say, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. You know what I mean? And so I believe I do not, and I choose to do this. I just don't watch it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't watch it. So when people say, did you see what was on? And I go, no, because I don't watch it. And because if I take my time to watch it, I am saying this is important enough for me to spend time watching it and to react to it and to base my opinions and what I'm going to write about and what I'm going to say by what is on television. I choose not to do that. I think most people in our business don't do it. Now, maybe younger people in the profession do. I grant you that. I don't know what 28-year-old reporters watch every day. Maybe they do watch it. Maybe that's their whole worldview is based on that. That could be. It could be. And if that's the case, then that's a problem. Because anything that you give currency to can be skewed, right? Mm-hmm. But I think most people just go about their daily business. I got to write about the Wizards getting Monty Morris in a trade. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to have time to watch. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't watch First Take. Or even I don't want to, and I don't want to tape it. I don't want to tape Fox. I don't want to tape it. Like that gives them power over me. Like, I got to see what they say before I decide what to write. Well, no, I don't, because I choose not to. If I'm going to be wrong, I'm just going to be wrong on my own merits. You know what I mean? Like, and so I'm just saying, all of us, whether it's a writer or a social commentator or a general manager or an active player or a retired player, you have the choice to give credence to people that you watch on TV. Mm-hmm. You can choose not to. You know what I mean? And you can just say, well, that's part of the discourse, and I don't give it any more authority or power than I give any columnist that I read. I'm just saying it's a choice. I choose not to. And I wish them well, but I choose not to.
Right. And I, you know, again, I say I have a lot of respect for the both of you and your body of work, the way that you conduct yourself, the way that you write your articles, the way that you cover the league and cover players, even when you're being critical of someone. You know what I mean? I respect the way that you do that, but unfortunately, not everybody is David Aldridge and Marc Spears. But I want to thank y'all for doing what you're doing, and please encourage you to keep on doing it. And this is a great discussion.
Yes, I love this. Yes, right. I agree.
It was a great discussion. So
anytime, Etan, I love talking to you about this stuff. I know you come to this from a genuine place, and so anytime you want to talk about anything, I'm with you. Let's have this. I mean, I always think it's better to talk than not to talk.
That's true.
That will solve a lot of our problems in this world if we would just talk about them.
Definitely agree. So I'm not gonna keep y'all anymore. What's that?
As the young people say, facts.
You got the young people lingo now, huh, Marc? Hey, well, listen. Again, I appreciate y'all for coming on the rematch. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm not going to take any more of your time, but thanks again, and y'all stay safe out there.
Yes, sir. You too, Etan.
All right.
Continued success, my man.
Definitely. Peace.